Hi guys. I'm having a break from rolling stock this week, and I'm going to be painting up this fabulous model from MS Models. It's a resin print and comes as two main parts with a little bag of detailing items to complement it. When I decided that I was going to build Nant Gwernol a few months back, I'd already seen a lot of these models that MS had brought out, and I knew that that's what I wanted for the layout. The station has beautiful interior detail, even if it's going to be hard to see on the layout as it'll be facing the other way. Luckily, the back is almost as interesting. I mean, do you really think I'd be able to make that sort of model from scratch? I don't think so. The end door even has a little private sign printed on. This version is modelled as present day and has little skylights in the roof, but I do believe the option is available without them. The floor section has the seating moulded on, and the rim has a little lip which helps locate it in the main body when the time comes. Looking at the detailing items, the first is the classic TR bin. It is hollow, so you could fill it with rubbish if you wanted. It even has the lettering printed on the sides, which is crazy. The other parts are the notice boards that you would see around the building. I'll be printing posters out to fit these later on. And finally, the station name board. This has little grooves in the back to align it correctly with the building, which I like. So the first thing to do is prep the body a little bit for paint. And to be fair, this only really needs a quick look at where the printing scaffolding would be removed from the model. And as a whole, you can see it comes to you super clean. So I'm just being picky to make it look like I'm doing something on the video. Oh, another thing is how the wooden supports slot into the base. This is brilliant as it's really easy to glue them on wonky when you make your own, which I commonly do. All I'm going to do for the base piece is scrub it with a rough paintbrush just to remove any loose bits that might be hanging on. Onto the primer, and for this I'm going to make a start with a full black coat. This will help aid the shadows as the other colours go on. It's known as pre-shading. It's not a bad idea to do this, even just to make sure that any missed paint going forward is hidden with a fake shadow. I'm going to start by painting the interior first, and as the ceiling is a greyish black, I'll mask it off for now and prepare for the walls. Because these are cream, it made much more sense to airbrush them, as this gives a much better coverage, as well as making it look super clean. Big brush marks are a pet hate of mine. You can see how easy and quick this is with the airbrush, and being acrylic, it'll dry really quick as well. That's all I'll spray on the interior, so I'll pull off the masking for now and start to paint up the roof. In reality, you're never actually going to see this, due to the angle of the station on the layout. But it's nice to know it's there. I can then start to pick out the woodwork with TR green. This is a custom colour that I've mixed up, and use it for all my TR layouts. And you'll see it a lot on the 5.5mm Pendray layout when I decide to show you it. The woodwork is obviously raised on the print, which makes it quite easy to paint. I say quite and not really easy because I have shaky hands and nothing's really easy in this scale. The interior is all painted for now, so I'll mask it off ready to paint the exterior walls. To save on masking tape, which is slightly expensive, I'll use toilet paper to cover the bulk of the model and tape around the edges to seal it in. The same TR green is then airbrushed over the model. I always mention I use a hairdryer to super dry the acrylic paint between coats, so I thought I'd show you how quick it really is. I've sprayed this green quite thick to get a strong covering, but you can see the paint drying and it turns matte as the water evaporates out of it. I'll do one more coat on top of this as the black undercoat is still making the main paint here quite dark. So the masking's coming off, and yay, it hasn't leaked into the cream. Moving on to the hand painted details. And this is where things take some time. The cream needs a few coats to cover the green wall, and due to how fine the details are, care is needed to get clean lines. I've said it a few times already, but I'll say it again. You won't see the interior that much on this layout, so I shouldn't beat myself up if I get a wobbly line here, but I will. The same cream will be used for all the details here, so I'll move on to the window frame on the outside. I found the best technique was to paint a row of panels at the same time, as in all of the bottoms, then all of the left sides, etc. And this will help make sure that you covered all angles. The door frame was a tough one here, as it's not actually a raised detail, so I started trying to mask it off to get a super clean line, and that didn't work. So I just took my time and tried to hand paint it, freestyle. The private sign was painted in black and the details picked out in white. The doorknob was painted in gold whilst I was there. Then I moved on to the little brick walls around the bottom of the building. I started by painting them with a base coat of slaty grey. This needed a couple of coats here as I was watering down the paint a little bit so I didn't lose the detail underneath. When it was dry, I then washed over it all with a thin coat of white. And before that cured, it was rubbed off with a cotton bud, which, in theory, leaves it in the mortar lines between the bricks. It didn't go too well, so I may revisit this. Moving on to the rear wall, and the rest of the building is masked off ready for spraying. And the back is sprayed grey. What I tried to do here was to spray from a higher angle, which then left the black undercoat in the shadows. When it was dry, I then dry brushed a lighter mix of grey down from above. This caught all the edges, which highlighted the details. The roof is then the last thing to spray, so it was masked off as well, and then sprayed with a lighter grey. I mixed the grey with a little brown to warm it up a bit. Like the rear wall, spraying it from above would leave tiny shadows under the details. With the airbrush put away for today, I moved on to hand painting the edges of the roof. Again, nice and easy due to it being slightly raised. The roof looked pretty bland as it is, so I added some interest by painting in some separate slates. I only used 2 other colours for this, and these were just the main roof colour lightened up a little bit with white. The roof then got a similar dry brushing as the rear wall. And the gutters could be painted in. I left these until now as they would have got a lot of overspray from the rear wall and the roof. The last bit for the green on the body was the edges of the building, so I masked these off so I didn't ruin the lovely rear wall. Since you'll be viewing the station from behind, it needs to look posh. The downpipes on the rear of the building are white, but they're not really looking their best, so I didn't want to give them a full covering. And this gave the impression of paint wearing off a bit. The building itself was pretty much done here, so I turned to the floor piece. So I started this by painting on a greyish white all over and then rubbing it off again with a tissue. This stains the tiles but also fills in the grout lines. I then repeated the process with a muddy colour, and yes, if you're a channel veteran, this is Earth Brown by Miniature Paints. This is rubbed off in the same way and's given the floor a used look. The building is then glued onto its floor and the whole thing got a weathering. This was just a quick dusting of earth brown along the bottom. Amazingly, this simple technique came out pretty well and doesn't look too dissimilar to the real thing. The details could then be painted up as well. The bin was sprayed in the same green as the station, which makes sense. And I glued it onto a piece of card to make it easier to hold. Then came the station name board. My idea here was to paint it in cream and then pick out the letters and call it a day at that. But I just couldn't get the lettering to look neat. Nothing to do with the print at all, it was just late in the day at this point. Anyway, what do I always say? It's on the front so no one will see it. Well, apart from the passengers. The border was picked out in green, which isn't as bad as the lettering. You still need a steady hand, mind. The name board was then glued on. As I mentioned before, it's got grooves at the back to help you set it at the correct place, which is nice. The board on the front was also glued on. I decided to leave the interior boards until I fitted the posters on them. The bin was also glued in. Of course, I had forgotten the gold lettering, so I'll have to revisit it before I set the station on the layout. So it's looking pretty good at this point, so I'll fit the glaze in. This was done with scrap clear plastic cut to shape. The window frames actually have a lip to fit the glazing onto, which I thought was a fab idea. It always looks too deep if you glue it on from the inside. Glue and glaze will dry clear in about 5 minutes. Here we go, some official TR posters printed in various sizes on photo paper. I had to make the no smoking ones on paint, but they look legit because they're only 3mm tall. Oh, and there's a defib on there as well. Gotta stay safe, guys. I used glue and glaze for these as well, purely because I had it out. And when I say out, I mean I don't need to stretch over to pick anything else up. The reason I print them at various sizes is that I didn't know what would fit the boards the best. I've also rubbed the posters face down on the cutting mat to dull the glossy finish a bit. My friend then sent me some drone shots of Nant Gwernol. And I spotted that the roof capping is actually a terracotta, not slate colour. Because I didn't want to ruin the dry brushing that ties them with the roof insulates, I used an orangey brown wash instead of a solid paint. This worked out well for what I can make out, so I'll just act like I knew it would. And yes, you're seeing that correct. I'm now jabbing the finished station with a paintbrush loaded with PVA. Am I mad? Medically, yes, but I have my reasons. The station building is sitting in woodland, so does have mosses growing up on the roof. The random jabbing gives a, well, random pattern to drop fine leaf scatter onto. I'll press down onto the scatter a bit to help them lie flat. Because the station's set in autumn, I gathered that the colour of this material would be too summery, and it needed to darken it a bit. So I use Ammo's Slimy Grime wash to alter the finish. I'm not messy, I am purposely getting more over the roof as well as the material, to try and get a softer look. And just like that, I've painted every single building required for Nant Gwernol. What can I say about MS models? Honestly, I don't think you'll get better buildings than these for your layout. They're accurate. Well, I know this one is, as I sent them the dimensions to model it from. They're cleverly designed, and they're loaded with detail. So a really big thanks to them for helping with this video. And if you want to get one, check out their website. I've put the link in the description. They do many prototypical buildings from other railways, as well as the Talyllyn. And you'll get a sweet 10% off your first order. Oh, I tell you which one of their kits looks nice. Roslyn Cottage. Where can I use that on a layout? Cheers.